Um, if you don't have a Bible, get one because we're going to be in it today. Okay, I was asked if I wanted to have any church music beforehand, and I kind of immediately thought no, they get to suffer for the whole hour and listen to me. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to do a split lesson, kind of. It'll be more like two-thirds, one-third, about lukewarm Christianity and having little faith. Um, kind of like the 95 Thesis, like Martin Luther was nailing out issues with the Catholic faith at the time. I'm going to address some issues that I can see nowadays and are very fixable. Um, I will start off by saying that I am arguably the most guilty when it comes to any of these. I'm not here to sound hypocritical because I am just as guilty as everybody else. Um, but from my uh, objective observational standpoint, people have been growing steadily lukewarm in previous years. Even though I'm only 19, I've noticed it. And people become really casual in their faith and casual about the way they live for the Lord and stuff. And the best analogy I can think of is one foot in the Word and one foot in the world, all the time. And that's not a very safe place to live and a safe place to be. Um, I'm not exactly sure why I chose these topics, but I saw it in myself and it kind of enraged me. And then the more I looked, I saw it in everybody else, and I decided that would be a good thing to talk about. So our first verse is in Revelation 3:15 and 16. Trista, can you read this? Okay. How many, by show of hands, so please participate, how many of you have had a drink of like lukewarm or like stale pop or milk or water and stuff? Yeah, it's pretty nasty. It makes you want to spit it out. And this is the best analogy I could come up with in this section, because he's referring to um, the context of this. Oh, whoops, that's for the next verse. So he's referring to the believers at the time, and Revelation is a prediction for the future and how the end of the world is going to shake down. And he's basically saying there's going to be people who are lukewarm, or people with one foot in the word, one foot in the world, and they are going to be disgusting to him because they're neither for him or against him. They're just kind of on the fence and pick a side is basically what he's saying, and but don't pick the wrong side. And that's what I got out of that. Um, my next my next verse is going to be in 2 Corinthians 13. Verses 5 through 7. James, you got it? Yeah, no, the other James. Yes, you. Do you have it? Sorry. You got it? Are you going to read? Let's hear it. Okay, that's kind of a word salad verse or a couple of verses. Um, 7 is kind of where I drew most of my um, good out of that. And I said, or it says, now we pray to God that you will not do anything wrong, not so that people will see that we have stood the test, but so that you will do what is right, even though we may seem to have failed. This is basically the way I interpreted it was, who cares what other people are seeing and thinking about you on your faith and your walk with God? And it's basically saying, now we pray to God that you will not do anything wrong, not so that people will see, but so that you will do what is right, even though we seem to have failed. Um, do what is right in God's eyes, and it doesn't matter. The world will say we failed. Say if we're living, trying to live for Him and not succeeding at it, and people will pick it out and call you hypocrite and all these other lovely names. But doing what is right in God's eyes is ultimately what I got out of this verse, and that the context of this section was Paul was addressing the early church in Laodicea, which is in Corinth, and he's urging the audience of being lukewarm, and it has eternal consequences. Um, and basically, if you got a letter from Paul in the early church, it was either an encouragement or basically your church was getting audited by the IRS. And so this was more of an encouraging letter. And the start in verse 5, it says, examine yourselves. Pretty self explanatory. Make sure you watch your own habits and your own behaviors so that you might not slip up and fail, like it says in verse 7. Um, Aim to ensure that your faith is genuine and not just a Sunday, Wednesday type of thing. This is going to hurt a lot of people's feelings. I don't care. Again, I'm just as guilty of it, but it's something that needs to be said. There's too much casual faith, too much Sunday, Wednesday, two-a-day kind of church type of thing. Um, One last verse on this topic before we kind of tie into the next one. 2 Timothy 3, verse 1 through 5. All right, Pierce, you got it.
But understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty. For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unpeaceable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness, but denying its power. Avoid such people.
So I got a lot out of the fifth verse, but I figured I should include the first four verses to give some context. And the last verse, I'll read it again. Having a form of godliness, but denying its power, have nothing to do with such people. How many people, whether it's friends or relatives or just random people you see on the street, they're spiritual or they're religious or they're this and that. That's kind of what he's talking about, having a form of godliness but denying its power. People will throw the spiritual and the religious card around to make the appearance that they're better than you or that they're not really as bad as you think they are or as they think they are. But if there's no if there's no belief in his power, there's not going to be any fruits to be yielded. And um, I chose this verse because it basically calls out people in church that are in church, but are not fully submitting to God and therefore having little faith. Which brings me to my next topic, and little faith and not having enough faith. and it kind of ties into the lukewarm Christianity in this verse quite well. Um, the way I came about the little faith deal was sometimes if I find myself in prayer, you know, it's not a good habit, but often you pray when you're stressed and instead of just praying all the time, and find myself clouded with doubt and not necessarily worry, but just not full confidence. And I always hear like a little voice in the back of my head that's saying, "Oh, you of little faith." And I remembered hearing like several areas in the Bible where it talked about that, but I was like, I'm not nearly as versed in this topic as I probably should be, so that's what I'm going to do it on. And let's see. By hearing, "Oh, you of little faith," it leads you to feeling shame because it's like, "Oh, my faith is not good. Like, I need it to be stronger." But ultimately, it turns into stronger faith because hearing, "Oh, you of little faith," requires that I have stronger faith and therefore believe stronger. So my first verse is Matthew 8:23 through 27. Gunner, you can read. Let's hear it. Matthew 8:23 through 27.
And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves, but he was asleep. And they went and woke him, saying, Save us, Lord, we are perishing. And he said to them, Why are you afraid, O you of little faith? Then he rose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. And the men marveled, saying, What sort of man is this, that even the wind and sea obey him?
I thought this was like most of us have heard the story of Jesus falling asleep on the boat. They had like the disciples had all kind of started following him, and they just wandered onto this boat, and we're out in the middle of the sea, and Jesus falls asleep. And I thought it was very interesting how Jesus equally rebuked not just the weather and the waves and stuff and telling them to calm down, but also his disciples for having such little faith. Um, Basically, he's kind of saying like, "Am I a joke to you? Like, what do you think I am? Like, not powerful?" And I thought this was very like more people need to hear this. Why are you so afraid, oh you of little faith? Whether it be in prayer or in daily activity and stuff like that. Way too many people are worried and stressed about how they're gonna, make ends meet or how something. Oh, you can think of a million examples. I just can't. About how you need to have more faith and stop worrying so much. And I could do a whole segment on worrying, but I don't have enough time on that. My next verse is Matthew 14:28 through 33. Tommy, read this one.
And Peter answered him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. He said, Come. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, Truly, you are the Son of God.
Again, almost exact same words as he was telling his disciples in the boat earlier when they were being ragdolled by this storm. He says, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And as you can see, the storm died down. He got rescued. Everything was fine. This is often the case when we're in the middle of prayer and we're in the middle of doubt. Um, and like Peter is allowing doubt to fill his mind rather than just trusting in the Lord, because he takes a few steps out onto the water and he's like, "Whoa, this is cool." And then he realizes, "Oh, I'm walking on water in the middle of the sea. Like, I'm going to die." And then immediately starts to sink. Our lives and our mindsets can kind of be a reflection of our um, doubt, allowing it to creep into our lives, just like this. Like if you're, I don't know, worrying and stressing about bills and about how you're going to make this happen or how this is going to work out and relationships and whatnot like that. The minute you allow doubt to take up even a little bit of space in your mind, you are starting to sink. And there's there's a fine line between allowing doubt to take space in your mind and being within reality. Like most people are just, when I say have strong faith, most people are thinking walk around life like a fairy tale and your head's in the clouds and you think everything's going to work out perfect. Still be in reality, but don't be so consumed by reality that you allow it to take the place of your relationship and your trust in the Lord. So, uh, on the subject of Peter and his faith, we'll go to Matthew 26, verse 69 through 75. Galen, you know how to read. Let's hear it.
Adjust my glasses. It's really small. Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came up to him and said, "You also were with Jesus the Galilean." But he denied it before them all, saying, "I do not know what you mean." And when he went out to the entrance, another servant girl saw him, and she said to the bystanders, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." And again he denied it with an oath, "I do not know the man." After a little while, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, "Certainly you too are one of them, for your accent betrays you." Then he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, "I do not know the man." And immediately the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the saying of Jesus, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly.
This brings me to my next clarification, I would say. A lot of people, when you say have strong faith and confidence, they think that means confidence in their self and their abilities. Well, yes, this is important because God helps those who help themselves. I believe you should take this example of Peter because Peter had unwavering faith. Like he was ready to throw hands with anybody, chop a soldier's ear off for, trying to arrest Jesus and stuff like that. Like he was ready to, you know, go to battle and stuff all the time. And that was a trait in his faith. But this instance, earlier when Jesus says, "You before the rooster crows, you'll disown me. You'll deny me 3 times." He's like, "No, even till death, I will be with, or I will stick with you. Like I will this, I will that." Well, the problem is he used the word "I," and um, he had unwavering faith. But in this instance here, it was in himself and his own personal abilities and his belief that he would somehow go against what Jesus had proclaimed was going to happen. Um, some people try to go against what God proclaims, and it usually doesn't pan out the way they think it should because it can't. And this is having this sort of faith is often the case with people, including myself sometimes, a lot of times, is that we rely solely on our own ability and use God as a safety net or a last resort when He should be the first line of defense or first line of protection. Um, how many people have thought of an instance where you're in deep stress praying about something and you realize that you've waited until you are in a vulnerable situation before you finally go to prayer? when in reality it should be your first thing you're thinking of doing and first way to combat these feelings of doubt and worry and whatnot like that. My next verse is Matthew 17, verse 14 through 20. You want to read? Let's hear it.
I brought him to your disciples, but then could not heal him. You, you unbelieving and perceives generous, Jesus replied, how long shall I stay with you? Who, how long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me. Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of the boy, and he was healed. In the moment that the disciples came to Jesus and perceived privately and asked, Why couldn't we drive it out? He replied, Because you have so little faith. Truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to the mountain, move from move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for me.
So the I thought it was kind of funny the words that Jesus used to rebuke not only the demon but as well as like his disciples and stuff. You unbelieving and perverse generation. That sentence would hurt some feelings back in the day. How long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me. Because inherently, these people are egging him on. They're like, please, please help us and all this stuff. And he's plumb willing to, but the fact that they're more wishing than they're more wishing for a miracle to happen than just simply believing that it will happen, um, as long as they humbly present it to Jesus. And bring him here to me. Uh, and then the disciples ask, why couldn't we drive it out? Because the disciples had been going around driving out demons and excuse me, and using their basically connections to the Lord to be able to do some of this kind of upper level spiritual stuff. And they say, well, why couldn't we drive him out? And Jesus said, because you have so little faith. Truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. So the disciples thought casting out demons was a cool party trick, if you will, to use to hopefully grow the faith, which is plumb good in theory, but if it doesn't work due to little faith, then what's the point in doing it? And they it didn't work because their faith was wavering. They were met with some adversity, like most of us are. And the minute we're met with adversity or something doesn't go completely according to plan, we panic and we hit the panic button and we're all freaked out all the time. We often pray things in hopes of seeing something happen. Hope, remember that word. You hope something will happen rather than praying with confidence that it will be granted unto you according to God's discretion. And this is a perfect example in here because they're, basically when you're shooting a basketball or you're shooting a rifle or something like that, you don't throw and hope or aim and hope. Basically, you aim where you need and you fire and you have confidence that it's going to do its job. If people would have confidence and just trust in the Lord that He will do His job like He always has and He always will, people would be in a lot better situation. Again, when I say people, I mean myself and the human race included. So, what do we do with this information, and how do we have proper faith according to the Bible? go to James 1, verses 2 through 8. Joseph, I presume you know how to read. Let's hear it.
Consider it a great job, my brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing. Now, if if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith without doubting. For the doubter is like a surging sea driven and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord, being double-minded, unstable in all of his ways.
Okay. So, let's see. Talks about perseverance and aiming to be mature and complete in the faith so that you're not lacking anything. Excuse me. And if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt. Not doubt, obviously. And because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. So I thought I kind of made the connection here. A person who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed about by the wind. We all have wind. We all have doubt. You know, the water's not always just calm and clear in life. And similar to how Peter starts, the minute he has doubt, he starts sinking. This is similar in people who are basically praying and asking God for things, yet having no faith. They're like, they know they want it. They know they want these things, and they know they think they should be in possession and have these things given unto them, but they don't have enough faith to back up their grants or their desires technically. And the another thing I drew out of this was understand that doubt and trials are a part of life and being human, but overcoming these factors through unwavering faith and not being tossed about by life's events, similar to being tossed around like the waves were tossed around by the wind. Um, this sounds counterintuitive, but many times people find themselves tossing prayers at God like a wishing well or a vending machine, not really believing that He is in fact real and completely capable of granting any request that He sees fit. Don't treat God like a fishing line that you throw out into the water and hope something bites or that He hears you on the other end. Pray with confidence and have faith that your requests will be granted unto you when the appropriate time is at hand. So that was just, a little bit more of my personal babbling about what I conjured up from this section here. My next verse is Matthew 21:18 through 22. Jake, I'd like you to read.
morning, as he was returning to the city, he became hungry. And seeing a fig tree by the wayside, he went to it and found nothing on it but only leaves. And he said to it, "May no fruit ever come from you again." And the fig tree withered at once. When the disciples saw it, they marveled, saying, "How did the fig tree wither at once?" And Jesus answered them, "Truly I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt, you will not only do what has been done to the fig tree, but even if you say to the mountain, 'Be taken up and thrown into the sea,' it will happen. Whether you ask in prayer, and whatever you ask in prayer, you will receive if you have faith."
So this is kind of another tie into the James verses, and saying, like earlier it said, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed. I don't know how many of you are well versed in your mustard seeds or mustard plant, but mustard seeds are very small. They're like, think of like like a small bead on like a beaded belt, about the size of them. And he's saying, if you have faith, even that little amount of faith, all of this can be added unto you and can be done according to his will. And the this is another example of the way he tells them to pray and the way he tells them, like, the disciples are kind of amazed at this, that he told this tree, may you never bear fruit again, and it just withers. They're like, oh, that's pretty cool. I'd like to be able to do that. Wrong. That's not really what they should have been after. They should have been after what he was saying, and he basically clarifies it because obviously we're not the quickest to catch on to things, even in this day and age. And Jesus didn't say this so people would go around and cursing and withering fig trees, or so people would try to make mountains go for a swim, like it says. But he said it more to illustrate the idea that with a strong faith, literally anything is possible. Um, to reiterate, I should say, um, I firmly believe a mountain could throw itself into the ocean if you should wish it to be, or if God deemed it appropriate, and if my faith was absolute in my request for it to do so. Most people don't walk around saying, "Oh, throw yourself into the sea," because that's just not what most people do. But the way he's using this example is some of the most improbable and impossible seeming things can completely be possible if you just have a little bit of faith. And not just a little bit of faith, but grow it and try to have as strong a faith as humanly possible. And I know it's kind of starting to sound like a repeat Sunday school lesson, but I can't really stress this enough, and how most people are just kind of taking for granted the power and the access to life and how good things can really be, but they just don't realize it because they don't have very strong faith. One last example of lending both faith in God and belief in your own ability is 1 Samuel 17. And 37 and 40 are the ones we're going to be looking at. Okay, for context, we've all heard David and Goliath. We all know how it shakes down. But a lot of people just kind of skim and scan over, and they don't read some of the words that David is saying, and they're really some pretty profound statements and prayers and stuff that he's making. So 37 is the Lord rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear. Or the Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Pretty self-explanatory. He's bailed me out before. He's gonna bail me out again. No shake in his faith at all. Um, then, oh, 40. Then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 stones, 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in his pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand approached the Philistine. So when I was little, I used to think he got 5 stones in case he missed, because most people are like, "Oh, here's a bunch of good rocks." Like, you know, odds are I might miss a time or two, and or take more than one shot. But most people didn't realize that Goliath had 4 other brothers who he was ready to catch the smoke with if they ever showed up, and he he this him taking out 5 stones was a kind of profound thing, I thought, because David had just as strong a faith in God that Peter did, um, except Peter got a little too full on that one time of having too much faith in himself. But David had kind of the right mix in this instance. He had plenty of faith and past experience because he's like, well, I've killed bears, I've killed lions, wolves, whatever has been harming his sheep. Um, what's another breathing target basically? And he has full faith in his own ability as well as God's ability to carry him through, and no matter what the situation is. And uh, thing I wrote about this was David used his past experience in both his faith and his livestock tending to already believe victory over his enemy. Um, Even though the whole Israelite army was doubting, and they're like, just basically a sacrifice out to this giant. He knew deep down it was already a done deal, and he was gonna proclaim victory, regardless of what people said, or even what Goliath thought, because Goliath was gonna be dead anyways. Um, and the one last kind of bullet I got here was, do not wander aimlessly through life, hoping that God might answer the phone when you call, but carry yourself with confidence and faith that God can and will deliver, despite the improbability of your situation. I hope this makes some sense to you, and that's about all I got for now. Any questions you guys might have?
Have you ever seen a celery seed?
I probably have at some point in some science class, but my brain probably rendered it rather useless to remember, so I don't really remember it. Probably smaller. I'm just gonna go out on a limb. I'd hate to be outdone by the seed size of somebody in the crowd. So
Did you really say in the sermon, God helps those who help themselves?
yeah, you'd be rather surprised where I got the inspiration for that. Um, my own father actually told me that, and he's not the preacher type at all. And he was telling me one day, I don't remember what we were talking about, but um, it was, I don't know, oh it was about some missions trip or something like that they were talking about at church, and I didn't really think much of it, and he starts talking about like people looking for handouts and all this stuff, and I'm like, get ready to offend some people, I don't care. And he's like, all this stuff that's going on, and everyone just hoping that everybody hoping that, like, God's gonna save them, and or other people are gonna save them. It's like, God helps those who help themselves. Meaning, if you're really in a bad situation and you're not doing everything in your power to get yourself out, finding another job or doing, um, learning a new skill, stuff like that. It's really hard to pity you because you're not really helping yourself out. So I don't know. I don't know how biblical of a statement that is, but yeah, every time every yeah, every time I've kind of heard that echoing through my head, I'm like, if I pray about something like say football or wrestling or roping or something like that, and I'm like not out roping the dummy or I'm not going to practice and giving it 100% or something like that, I'm like, why should God answer my prayer when I'm not even putting up my half? So that's kind of how I applied that.
In your experience, like from either your own personal experience or watching others, like you were talking about, what are the consequences of a poor spiritual life?
Um, the best way I can put it, this is probably a copyrighted story at this point, but I'm gonna say it anyways. So, um, well, there's two of them technically. So there's a guy and he's wandering around, and God comes up to him on one end. He owns this land over here, and then there's a fence, and Satan comes up to here and he owns this land. And there's a fence in between this land. And this guy, he's just kind of wandering back and forth, wandering through life, wandering through the world and stuff. And, God's trying to get him to come over here. He's like, well, yeah, maybe after a bit. And then Satan's like, I want you to come over here. He's like, well, yeah, maybe after a bit. And he doesn't make a firm decision, similar to the way he was talking about in Revelation. And when the time comes and this man's life is required from him, he's still sitting on the fence. He doesn't know which side he wants to go on. And God goes away and Satan comes up and he's like, "You're coming with me." And he's like, "I didn't choose you. Like I don't want this. I didn't choose your side." He's like, "The fence belongs to me." So, if you are not fully on God's pasture over here, you're going to be swept away. And the other example I can think of is um, living in sin is like sitting in a holding cell, but the door is wide open, and it's pretty comfortable in there. You get fed 3 meals a day, and you don't really feel a need to leave until the door is slammed shut, i.e., when you die, and then you can't escape, and then by then it's too late. So those are kind of the consequences that I can conjure up that I can think of. Um, I don't know. Research at your own risk, I guess. I think Michelle had a question.
And I have a question. I was just going to add to what you were talking about earlier. It just made me think of this, that David didn't show up with no rocks and a slingshot. He did his due diligence as well.
Yeah. Yeah, again, God helps those who help themselves. You don't just, you can, in theory, just pick up a rock and slingshots and say, "Oh, I've never done this before," and it still could work so long as God deemed it appropriate. But he was not skimping on his slingshot training and his animal killing before he came to this point. That was part of the reason why he had so much confidence. Is he's like, well, I've killed a giant four-legged animal that's tried to rip my head off. So what's this random giant gonna do to me?
More faith from us who know our biblical teachings more than the outside.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I think so. He commands us not to remain babes in our walk with Him. Therefore, the more you know, the more you grow, and the more you should be expecting to trust in Him and have faith in Him, regardless of the situation. If you got some person who was just saved, yesterday or last week, you wouldn't really expect them to have enough faith to be able to pray through a cancer diagnosis or something like you would an experienced Christian and stuff like that.
Afraid because I grew up in that, I've allowed myself to get cold.
Well, don't get cold.
Because it seems too easy and it seems too commonplace, and I go to church every Sunday like you said and try to hit Wednesdays, and pretty soon you get lackadaisical.
An example I can come up with is just going through the motions. This has served as a good reminder, say in like wrestling especially. Uh, it gets really easy to just show up when it comes 1st of February and the season's still got a month or two left, or month and a half left, and you're starting to get tired, season's getting long, weight cuts getting to you, whatever, and it's easy to just go through the motions, just drill your moves and just get done and get out. But if you just start getting lackadaisical, there's somebody out there who's hungry and who's going to be working harder than you. And if you just go through the motions, you're going to get caught and you're going to get beat at one point or another. It very rarely can you just show up and go through the motions and still just throttle everybody. But the in this instance, the person that's hungry for you to slip up and to get tired is Satan in this instance. He's um, waiting for you to get complacent and to start just kind of getting idle in life until he can use his advantage and trap you and trip you up. Hmm.
Anybody else? We have just time for a couple more, and then we're gonna pray for Kale.
I just want to say, the prayer, in any time that I've had a lot of problems or things, prayer is always something I've turned to, and it's helped me. I'm walking because of prayer,
Amen.
and literally, I am walking because of the prayers that were given for me by everyone that I knew, probably. And today, if I have problems or worries, if I pray, I don't worry. And worry is a great stress for me and for a lot of people. And so that's, I would encourage you to pray. And no matter if you just say, Lord, help me. I need help for myself. I need help for someone else. It doesn't have to be a formal prayer. It can just be talking like you're talking to the animals. You talk to God. Okay?
I have a question. Go ahead.
So, I love how you presented this. Do you find it hard to talk to kids at school, your friends, the same way? God, the Lord?
Yeah, you'd be kind of amazed what a bunch of senior boys talk about at the lunch table, depending on the day. Some days it makes you want to spit your food out, and other days you know, we've had pretty good in-depth debates about, just the differences in faith, but whether it's because like one of my best friends he's a Catholic and I'm non-denominational, and some are Lutheran and stuff like that, and we have a lot of good conversations and stuff about that, but I probably don't shove it down their throat like in this style like I would to people who are kind of accustomed to hearing about God. I kind of try to make it more like, well, have you ever thought about like what God says or what the Bible says about it and stuff like that? And as a 19-year-old kid in high school is not exactly the easiest thing to do, but I've kind of grown to the stage where I'm like, they're just opinions, they're just thoughts and feelings. Like, what are they gonna do? Hurt my feelings? They can't. And the most they're gonna do is say no or say they don't want to hear about it and carry on our conversation and just hope that seed's planted. And that's really about all you can ask for most of the time.
We're gonna round this out.
Richie has a question.
Oh, Richie has a question. No, you go, man. You go.
You talk about being lukewarm. Have you been in situations, let's piggyback on the school, about not speaking up? 'Cause I know there's instances in school and sports and a lot of things where you were here in the background, people like, oh, this church guy or these people believe in this and that. I think being part of lukewarm is not saying anything about it, is let that pass them by and not having the courage to step in and say, put in your 2 cents. Have you been in those type of situations?
Yeah. Again, I'm probably gonna hurt more feelings, but when I was here at New Underwood, it was like I had dang near had to beg the football coach to let me out in time for church and stuff. And I switch over to wall and like we're praying after games and say the Lord's Prayer in the locker room before we walk out, and get out at least a half hour early or sooner every Wednesday night and stuff like that. And it it makes it a lot easier to, kind of jump on the bandwagon and pray with everybody when like your team and like all your stud athletes are doing it. But it's like even at when I was at New Underwood school, I always knew like what was right and that I can't be shaken up by external factors because it's not exactly easy when nobody really goes to church that much on your team or in your class and stuff and be like, hey, I think we should cut it early and go to church or something like that. And I've said that to some of my people and they're like, oh yeah, that you should ask him. They just wanted out of practice early, but I gave them my reason for wanting what I wanted and thought I was in the right, and whether or not they took advantage of that opportunity for their own spiritual gain is up to them. And I tried to do what I could, and it doesn't always work out, but you just can't get too complacent. You just gotta let it slide off your back, kind of when you get in a bad, not in a bad situation, but when you're getting in a situation where it's like nobody's really getting what I'm saying, but I'm just gonna say it anyways, and just kind of trust that God will work through you, basically.
Okay, so this is bittersweet for me. I guess I have to have the mic so
Oh my
she's my partner.
goodness. You just want this one?
No, you have to.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is actually really bittersweet for me. For some of you more so who had High Point and everything, but we came in. Jake took high school. I took junior high youth group, and we'd meet downstairs. And that was Kale and Jessica's 6th grade year. And we had a whole crew of them. You know, life happens, people go, things happen, whatever. But we'd go through lessons and stuff. And Kale and Jessica, by October of that year, would stay after and be like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And Kale probably doesn't remember this, but he went home and told his mom one day, Chastity's like hitting Google for Bible search. And it was just fun because it was such a delight for years. And Kale, you don't know this, but for years at Elm Springs, I'd said, Lord, send me someone to disciple because that is our call as Christians, to disciple somebody younger and to continue because it makes us grow. And Kale and Jessica don't believe in softball pitches. They were like, let me lob this, let me lob this, let me lob this. They were great questions. I would go home at night on Wednesdays with my soul just singing because of the depth that they pushed me to. And it was so much fun because, rewinding even further, when Kale was a little kid, before he even started school, Kale's career plans were to become a professional football player and a pastor. And he has the talent for both, but his 6th grade year, we never required it of him. Every year since then, we have asked Kale to lead at least one youth group session because I believe that in the church, we need to constantly be raising up our leaders. And Kale has been tried and true in this, and it has been a delight. Jed, will you double-click that picture for me? This just reminded me of life.
I don't know if we need to be having that up there.
Are they not just the cutest? I was going to show it last week, and I thought Kale's never going to show up if I show it during Jessica's. Anyhow, it is very, very cool to me to see. It's very precious to me to watch these kids. When Kale hadn't even started school yet, he'd come hang out with me sometimes when Crousers had just moved here and Sally needed to go work, and Whit was working too. Kale would come hang out with me, and we'd play the guessing animal game over and over. And that kid, he's a 5-year-old, and he knew he could have written an encyclopedia on animals. I couldn't win. But it is a delight, Kale, to watch you grow into the man that you are. We still laugh about his trench coat interview. We still constantly say, yeah, I basically went out there and tech-falled everybody. It's a good way to go through life. But continue to walk in that confidence. We are going to pray, but I am actually going to ask, and I know a lot of you guys have poured into them. I know that we've had a stellar youth group leading team this year and stuff, but I'm actually going to ask that Galen and Dave and Richie and Steven and Justin and Kent and Casey and Dylan and Daniel and Jake, anybody, and Lawrence. And I would like all of you guys to come up. You guys are going to pray over him. And then I'm also going to ask, Kent, you too, and then Gunnar And Blake, you guys carry this on next year. You guys are seniors. This is a call. So I want you guys to come up with them too. You guys don't all have to pray, but I do. Mind I mess you up if I make you come down too? Please do. You guys do not all have to pray, but I really do want you guys to do whatever God tells you to do, and then somebody say amen, and then we can all go home.
Father God, I thank you for Kale. I thank you for the many talents and blessings you've given him. Lord, I do pray that you would keep growing him in a humble and contrite and guided way in a good direction. I pray that you will answer his questions, where to go from here and what to do next whenever he asks, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray.
Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for Kale. I thank you for his parents and his family who've done a good job raising him. Father God, I thank you for his confidence. And Lord, we just know that Kale's confidence comes from you, Lord. We thank you for his faith, his unwavering dedication to you. And we thank you for the leadership and the role model that he's been for, I know my kids and all these other little boys and probably these little girls too. But Father, I just pray that he would know the impact he has had on them, and pray that he would continue to shine the light and be the light in this complicated world, Lord.
Father, I thank you for Kale. 4 or 5 years ago, when Jake led a Bible study for guys on Wednesday night, I was amazed at the wisdom shown by this then 14-year-old boy. And I'm just as amazed tonight watching how this 19-year-old young man has so much wisdom and has been given the gift of being able to share it. And it's obvious that he got the best of both his parents. And we just pray as this young man goes out into the world that he'll just continue to grow and share and be blessed by you. In Jesus' name.
Heavenly Father, Lord, I do pray for Kale as he exits high school and moves on to whatever he's going to do, Lord. I just pray that you continue to surround yourself around him, Lord, that you continue to help him to grow. Lord, that if it be your will, Lord, that he does truly want to be a professional football player and pastor, Lord, that you lead him in that. Lord, this world needs young leaders. It needs young men that are willing to step out in their faith. Lord, I just pray that you help him to disciple others to do the same. I pray all this in your name.
Lord, thank you for Kale. Thank you for blessing him with such confidence in your way, Lord. I pray that he continues to grow in your word and he's unashamed to tell the truth, Lord. That you continue to grow in him and that he goes into this world and he does lead other young men to you, Lord. Everyone's right. We need more young men to draw near to you, Lord. So help him to do that. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Heavenly Father, I pray for Kale's future occupations, for his future spouse and children that potentially he may have on the horizon. Lord, I would pray that the days ahead are filled with wisdom from you, Father, that no matter the career occupation, whether it is a professional athlete of some kind or it is a janitor somewhere, Father, I pray that Kale would be the best at whatever he is called to do, Father, that ultimately the calling to serve you, Lord, would be with him no matter where he lands. Lord, I pray safety over his days ahead, and that the light that you've placed in him would continue to shine strong, Father, that more men and more people would come to know you through him, Father.
Kale, I'd ask you to keep planting those seeds as you go out and talk to people. You'll see seeds may take root immediately or decades later. Keep going. Amen.
As Kale was doing his sermon today, it was good to see all the young kids in our church look up to him. There's so many bad role models around the world. It's good to see light and what Jesus can do if you put him first in your life. I pray that, I hope that he instilled some seeds in our youth, and I hope that we can see the light in the tunnel and know that if Kale can do this, that they can do it as well. In Jesus' name we pray.
Lord, I thank you for Kale. Thank you for the young men who are following him and will be sharing next year. I ask for the bond between them. I ask that you encourage them and that they continue to encourage each other and grow together in you. We need that support. We need not only role models, but we need friends and people surrounding us that support us and encourage us when we need them most. They would bond together, continue to stay in touch, and encourage one another, continue to grow in you, Lord, and that they would not lose that sense. In Jesus' name.
Lord, I thank you for Kale, and I thank you for him being the light in this world that so many of us are trying to keep covered up under that lampshade. That, Lord, we thank you that Kale has chosen to keep his light shining for all to see. And Lord, we ask that you continue to bless him with wisdom in whatever direction he goes in life. Lord, we ask these things in Jesus' name.
Lord, I thank you for Kale. He's a great role model to look up to, and great guy to be around with all the wisdom he provides for all of us, and the courage he gives me to share in high school and look up to. In Jesus' name.
Lord, I thought of one more thing. I want to pray over Kale the same blessing that I pray over my sons. Lord, may he be given abundance from your earth's richness. May he always find love and pleasure and joy and contentment in the wife of his youth. May his children follow him in his faith in you, and may your good spirit always lead him on level ground.
Amen.
Amen.
Blake and Gunnar, we look forward to watching you guys take this place.
Little known fact, that might be the last time I smiled in a picture, just so you guys know.